Voters in the state of Georgia will today determine the balance of power in the United States Senate when they cast ballots in two Senate runoffs races that could have major implications for the legislative agenda of the incoming administration of President-elect Joe Biden. The high-stakes nature of these special elections saw political heavyweights descend on the Peach State Monday, including outgoing President Donald Trump. And the man who defeated him last November, a record 3 million people had already cast their ballots in early voting to determine if the two Republican incumbents, Senators David Purdue and Kelly Loeffler, can be unseated by Democratic challengers Jon Ossof and Rev Raphael Warnock.
With polls opening at 7 a.m. local time for 12 hours, the country's political focus is largely on what happens in a state that flipped Democratic for the first time since 1992, when Biden edged Trump in the presidential 2 months ago, even though the latter refuses to concede that he lost.
The Democrats are trying to steal the White House. You cannot let them. You just can't let them steal the U.S. Senate. You can't let it happen. You can't let it happen. David and Kelly are running against the most extreme liberal candidates in the history of your state, probably in the history of our country, Jon Ossof and Raphael Warnock.
If Republicans hold just one of the Senate races, they will retain the majority that they view as a key check on future Democratic power in Washington. For Democrats to prevail, they must win both races, which could create a 50-50 tie in the Senate, with Vice President-elect Kamala Harris providing a tiebreaker vote when required.
I know this campaign has been exhausting. You put the hard work in over the last few years to get to this moment. It's been intense. It's been nonstop. But I'm asking you to give everything you've got one more day. One more day. And that one more day, this is not hyperbole, you can change America. As our opposition friends are finding out, all power flows from the people. From the people. That's our history. That's our law. That's our tradition. That's our Constitution. That's our democracy. Politicians cannot assert, take, or seize power. Power is given, granted by the American people alone.
Polls, for what they're worth, show a dead heat in both races. And while runoff elections tend to favor Republicans, record turnout for Democrats thus far in early voting has created greater expectations of a photo finish when all the numbers are tallied.
Gotta call your friends, your family, your coworkers, your folks at school and church, your frenemies. Make sure that they have a plan to vote, because the future of the country's on the line. You heard Chuck Schumer say, now we take Georgia, then we change America. Well, we're not going to let him.
But with Georgia turning blue for the first time in almost 30 years last November, optimism among Democrats that history could be in the offing again.
The wealthy and the well-connected have no shortage of representation in Washington. It's time for ordinary people, folk who go to work every day, folk who would love to go to work, but they've lost their jobs due to no fault of their own. It's time for ordinary folk to have representation in Washington. And if you send me to the Senate, every single day I'll have Georgia on my mind.
It's unclear how quickly results will be finalized after polls close at 7 p.m. local time, and just a day before another political showdown in Washington, when the US Congress must affirm the Electoral College win of Joe Biden amid expected objections from Republicans. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
And of course, for more on this and what happened today, we're live to our correspondent in the US, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. So, Sherwin, we spoke about this yesterday, and for those perhaps who weren't tuned in, explain this for us. Joe Biden is the president-elect. He'll be sworn in on the 20th of January. So why are these two Senate races so important? Why is it a high-stakes game?
The Senate, Tsepiso, has an outsized role in terms of the legislative agenda of a sitting president, right? The House certainly has a role, the House of Representatives. But in terms of what future President Biden would seek to achieve in terms of judicial nominees all the way up to the Supreme Court, in terms of legislation that he would seek to have passed by both houses of Congress, if an opposing party has control of the Senate, reaching that level of consensus that is required to pass legislation, given the fact that you have such divided political atmosphere in the United States, becomes that much more difficult. Just ask Barack Obama when he lost the House of Representatives in 2010, 2 years after he took office. Just ask President Donald Trump when they lost the House to Nancy Pelosi in 2018. It becomes more difficult for a sitting president to get through his legislative or her legislative agenda if there is a divided government in power. And it's also about a vision that the two parties in this race have for the future of the country, a message that both a Republican and Democratic Senate nominees raised on the campaign trail. Let's watch.
Are you ready to fight for health and jobs and justice for all the people? Are you ready to send a message that echoes not just from coast to coast, but down the generations about what this state stands for? Atlanta, we just have a few hours left. I'm asking you to dream about what's possible. I'm asking you to believe in what's possible. I'm asking you to work to make real what is possible.
This is about the future direction of our country. If you look at what history has told us, socialism, the price of socialism is freedom. And what's at stake here right now is the Democrats want to perpetrate a socialist agenda on our country. We know that. And what we're doing right now in Georgia with these two seats is holding the line. If we win Georgia, we save America.
To give you one further example, Tsepiso, right, you have the two visions of America, but remember when Barack Obama in 2016 sought to nominate a Supreme Court Justice, Merrick Garland, February of 2016, didn't have control of the Senate. Mitch McConnell blocked that nominee, didn't ever give Merrick Garland a hearing, and so that's the power that the Senate Majority Leader wields, and that's why Joe Biden wants that to be a Democrat after these Senate races in Georgia.
Okay, now, Sherwin, just looking at the length of time it took for counting the votes last November, obviously for multiple reasons, what are the expectations of the results this time? When will they come out? And also, are they vulnerable to further legal action?
Well, candidates can complain. They can ask for audits and for recounts if it is a very tight race, as we are reporting. I think in Georgia, if it's within 0.5%, you can then request a recount. You can then have audits. And so we could go through something similar to what we saw post the results being tabulated in November last year. It's further complicated, Tsepiso, by the fact that military ballots could come in later. So if it's a close race, you want to wait for those military ballots to come in on Friday before a final result is made known. But what's different about this race is that you only have the two Senate races on the billing. So you don't have a presidential race, you don't have judicial races, you don't have down ballot races, all the congressional races in a state that would normally be on quite a lengthy ballot in a presidential race is what we saw last November. This is quite different. It's just the two Senate races, so very, very specific count that will be happening. One expects it to go quickly, but maybe 24 hours, maybe a little longer. We don't expect results to come through tonight, just given the fact that there's such a large number of mail-in ballots, and that tends to delay the count, as we learned so vividly last November.
Okay, so while Georgia is on people's mind, this, as you say, is a sideshow for what will happen during a joint sitting of both houses of Congress tomorrow, when the legislature is actually supposed to affirm Joe Biden's electoral college win. So why the continued pressure from President Trump or for Republicans to somehow overturn the inevitable, as many see it?
Well, of course, he's not conceded this race. He was out campaigning for Kelly Loeffler and David Purdue in Georgia last night. And of course, half that campaign rally speech was not just about the Senate race, but about how this election is being stolen. And he tweeted earlier, Tsepiso, this is a direct quote from that tweet: "The vice president," of course, that's Mike Pence, "has the power to reject
fraudulently chosen electors. Of course, Mike Pence, as the vice president, will preside over that joint sitting of Congress tomorrow, where they essentially have a perfunctory role, essentially have to file the paperwork, have a ceremonial rubber stamping of what the states have decided. The states have certified these election results. Over 60 court cases have found no fraud or evidence of ballot rigging. So when the president refers to Mike Pence having a role to reject fraudulently chosen electors, no one really knows what he's talking about, but he continues to talk about it as he did at that rally last night. Let's watch.
There's nothing the radical Democrats will not do to get power that they so desperately crave, even the outright stealing of elections like they're trying to do with us. We're not going to let it happen. Over the past, and I hope Mike Pence comes through for us, I have to tell you. I hope that our great vice president comes through for us. He's a great guy. Of course, if he doesn't come through, I won't like him quite as much. No, Mike is a great guy. He's a wonderful man and a smart man and a man that I like a lot. But he's going to have a lot to say about it. And you know one thing with him, you're going to get straight shots. He's going to call it straight.
The New York Times reporting today to Peace that Mike Pence has a master of ceremonies role rather than an arbiter of the outcome. So he does not have the power to overturn what the states, the Electoral College in the various states have decided. He can't throw out Joe Biden's electors if they feel that that state didn't go their way because of fraud or whatever. It hasn't been proven in the courts. So Joe Biden will be affirmed by Congress. It might just be a longer episode than one had originally expected.
And speaking of episodes showing Donald Trump is certainly the main show that a lot of people continue to watch out of interest. Thanks so much for that, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, colleague in New York in the United States.